People have a lot of anxiety in this day and age, right? And I feel like social media could be a reason to blame. A lot of people would probably point to social media, but the only issue I see with pointing to social media, it's kind of like if somebody's caught out in a thunderstorm and they get struck by lightning, right? It's almost like saying that like social media. It's almost like saying in that situation that the thunderstorm is the reason they got struck by lightning, right? When in theory it could be said that the issue was that they weren't indoors, right? That they're outdoors during a thunderstorm, and that's the reason they got struck by lightning, right? That's kind of how I see blaming social media for the anxiety that people have, right? Because, or let's just say not even just social media, but the internet in general, right? And this is something that there was a book by Jordan Peterson where he talked about it. I think it was 12 Rules for Life. Um, and I know there's people who don't like Jordan Peterson or whatever, but that don't matter to me. I look over the character of people that's put out there that people get so uh, divided by, and I look at what they say and what they're trying to point out. But Jordan Peterson, he's basically saying that the internet has kind of created this thing where like I'm trying to remember exactly how he phrased it, but here's like a slight example of like what he had meant. He was basically saying like for instance, if you have a person that is a excellent chef, right? That you know personally. Before the internet, that person can have like a pride about them, like being the best chef among their family, or or even if say if they're a person who shares their meals with the community that they live in, they'll be known as the best chef in their community and all that kind of stuff. Maybe there might even be restaurants in the area that like request them to come cooking and all that kind of stuff, right? And they can kind of feel a fullness of life from that and achieving that. But now, thanks to social media, people can pull up people making meals online and saying like, "Hey, can you cook like this person?" Or like they'll be like, "Yeah, man, I went to last time I took a trip, I went to this guy's restaurant. It cost a lot of money, but you're not cooking like him, right?" Or maybe a better example would be like a musician, like somebody that can play the guitar real well, right? Like in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that before social media, right? When the only people to look at in regards to competition for the local guitar person would be somebody who's like super famous, like a Kurt Cobain or something like that, right? Or maybe that's not the best example for a great guitar player. Maybe like a Dimebag Darrell or somebody like that would be a better example. But basically, what I'm getting at though is that the in those times, the local guitarist can have like a pride about him. He's really the best guitarist in like the whole of Broward County or Westchester County, wherever you want to name, right? But now with the internet, somebody can just pull up a video of some guy in Yugoslavia that's shredding the guitar way better than he can, right? So and it's like that. And what Jordan Peterson was basically explaining is that like with the internet and stuff like that, it's like that on every level now. It's like that on every level where you have a girl who's like who before she would be the prettiest girl in her college or her high school or whatever, and now guys can pull up a whole bunch of girls on the internet that look just as or even better than she does. And this has had a real effect on people's minds in regards to that, right? Because it's like this. When those are just like basic things, those are things in regards to like recognition, right? But I think that's only like that's a piece of the puzzle in regards to the anxiety that people are having, right? But as I'm saying, that's had a real strong effect on people, right? Now, but along with that, you have the so many things that add into it, particularly the things that people are lacking in life, right? Right? Like there are certain milestones in life that would make people feel complete in life before, right? Such as home ownership, relationships, romantic relationships, that is, and having children. That is not happening for people at the stages and levels that they used to, right? Like there was a point in time where it was a common thing for people to get married between about the ages of like 18 to around 22, around there, right? In the ancient world, even before that, right? Uh, But now we're at this point in time where people are getting married later and later. There's more divorces happening. Majority of people, particularly under the ages of 30, are having a much harder time forming relationships, right? And a lot of people aren't having kids. So, right, and then along with that, people aren't meeting monetary goals or even making enough money to quote unquote own a house. And I say quote unquote own because when you get a mortgage that you have to keep paying off, you don't really own your house. The person or the entity that owns your house is who you're paying your mortgage to. But anyways, but at least you still have rights to it, right? You can get people who are getting rights to their own places a lot earlier, right? So now there's a lot of things that are in kind of like the reverse order that life was going in for people, where people would cross these milestones. It would start to make them feel more complete and more fulfilled in life, which is why, in part, I think we have this world now where people care so much about these things that don't really affect their station in life and don't really improve it, because on top of people lacking those things, they lack the knowledge, information, or know-how on what to even do to try and get those things. They lack the knowledge, information, and know-how on as to why, a lot of people are lacking those things right now, right? Because even in regards to like economics and how they work, the game is made to be so tricky, and most people do not get taught it. I had economics as an elective in high school. It's an optional class, right? Meanwhile, the things that are mandatory are things like math and algebra and all that kind of stuff, and literature and science, and everybody knows typical stuff. Social studies, right? So it's no wonder, like, you don't the things that you actually need to know and understand about life, people don't get taught those things, right? The things that you actually need to know and understand, whether it be things like how rent works, how credit works, right? How loans and mortgages works, how banking works, right? Those kinds of things, people, they don't teach you that, right? So those are things that in some way somehow you're supposed to just get to know it, right? Or you're supposed to be fortunate enough to have parents that can teach you about it. But as you actually go and you learn about these things, and or if you go and even look up a lot of stuff about them, you realize it's a lot of it is so, I won't even say complex, right? Because the legal system is more so complex, but economics just has a lot to it. Like, it's massive, the amount of stuff that goes into economics to understand about it and how it works. And there's even quite a bit of it that's theoretical, almost to a level of psychology, right? So, but there's so much to it that you realize there's no way the majority of people around you know what is a lot of economic factors consist of, or what a lot of I guess you could say the how economics has a much more bigger effect on your life, right? Than people really even understand, right? You start to see that these things, I mean, what I'm saying, like, when if you analyze and examine it, like how I'm trying to do right here, you start to realize these are the things that are the source of anxiety, right? An example I'll use to kind of prove my point further and what I'm getting at. Let's say if you went to sleep at night in your regular bed, everything's all fine, right? And when you wake up in the morning refreshed, you wake up in the middle of a random park, right? Random park, right? Immediately, I'm pretty sure, unless you're some kind of psycho or something, that this has happened to before, and you're just like, oh, I'm in the park again, right? Unless that's the case, you're probably going to be filled with anxiety immediately. You're probably going to be filled with fear immediately, right? And the reason why you're going to be filled with that fear is because you have no idea where you are, you have no idea how you got there, and you have no idea what to do. For some reason, you're in the middle of your same old bed in the middle of a park, and you just woke up there, right? A whole lot of stuff is going to be running into your mind. So much stuff is going to be flooding into your mind in regards to what's going on and what's happening, that you're probably not even going to be able to fathom what to do for a good amount of time, right? Then maybe after around 30, 40 minutes, when a bird comes and lands on your bed or something, or defecates on it, maybe you're going to have to get up and Right? And then maybe you're going to start looking around. And then now, let's say you look at the street signs, and the street signs are in a language that you don't speak. Even more anxiety is going to start to fill you up. Right? Lack of information, confusion, right? Lack of know how, right? Lack of memory, right? Or just things that you just don't even know, well, in regards to what happened that got you there, right? You'll wonder if you've been touched in some kind of way, if you were abused, or or assaulted in some kind of way. You'll wonder that, right? There's a lot of things that you would wonder in that situation of you randomly waking up in a park, right, with no knowledge of anything, right? So now, let's say on the other end, let's say you're about to go to sleep at night regularly in your bed, and you get a text message from a random number that says, hey, for the chance to win $10 million, right, while you're sleeping, right, or let's say, yeah, no, let me just keep going. While you're sleeping, you're going to be moved to the middle of a park in Russia, and you're going to have to make your way out of Russia to the airport and back to America. If you can do that, you'll get $10 million, right? And you click yes. There's a knock on your door, and you go to your door, and there's a box there. You open the box, and there's a sleeping medication in there, and with instructions that this is part of the game for you to get the $10 million. And you take that sleeping pill, and then now, within the time when you wake up in the middle of your bed in that random park. Immediately, you're not going to have that level of anxiety, right? And the reason why you're not going to have that level of anxiety is because prior to you waking up in the middle of this park, you got all the information you needed onto as to why you're waking up in the middle of a park in somewhere where you don't know the language, right? There might be a level of preparation that you're able to do. You may be able to start remembering everything that you know about Russia, anything, any and all things that you can, right? So now in this situation, when you wake up in the middle of a park in Russia now, knowing this in your mind, there's a lot less anxiety, right? You check your pocket, you have your phone, you immediately go to Google Translate and start typing up basic messages to ask certain people like, hey, how do I get to the airport from here? Hey, I need your help. Hey, I'm part of a game where I'm going to win some money. If you can help me out, I'll give you a million of the $10 million that I'm going to get, right? You can work that out now, right? You know what to do. Like, despite the random situation, well, I guess in this case it's not random, right? But despite the situation and how odd or how strange it may be, due to you having knowledge and information as to what you're doing, why you're doing it, right? Not only do you not have that level of anxiety, but you actually get to start to formulate and idealize what you have to do to get out of your situation, right? So, what really is the cause of the anxiety? It's like I said in the beginning with the comparison that I gave to there being a storm outside and you getting struck by lightning, right? Is it the storm's fault that you got struck by lightning, or is it that you didn't have shelter, right? So, what is the real cause of anxiety? Is it all these things around us that we think, like people will say it's the music, it's the drugs, it's the social media, it's the adult entertainment, it's they'll name so many things, right? But it's the collection, it's the whole thing about the situation, right? Because even if, say, all these things still persisted, like you still have social media, you still have all the kinds of poisonous things through the internet that people, assume is a lot more dangerous than it is, right? But even if you had all these same things, right? I doubt there would be a level of confusion if there was, like, some whole guide and instruction list given to people on as to why these things are, right? You wouldn't have that level of anxiety. If you still had a world where people were regularly meeting the milestones of life, right? If you had a world where people can work a job at McDonald's and, have an apartment that cost them like $800 to $1,000 per month in total of all their rent and utilities, right? If those were available to people, you probably wouldn't see the level of anxiety in society that you see now, right? So I think people need to think about this, and when I say people, I'm not excluding myself from this. I don't mean to sound like, pretentious or pompous or anything like that. But I think we as people, we need to think about it as in that situation that I proposed, right? As if we're in a park that we just woke up in. We don't speak the language. We have no information on what we're doing, what's going on, or why we're here, right? We're looking at signs and they're all in Russian, right? Or we don't even know it's Russian because we're not familiar enough with the language to know what it is, right? Let's say that's the case. All right. If you if you start looking at the situation like that, then you can maybe start to decode what the real issue is, right? Because let's say if we take it back to the example that I gave and at first, in which you're just waking up and you know nothing, right? Well, the first thing that you need to do is know, right? The first thing that you need to do is know. And that's with everything in life, right? That's with everything. If you're at a friend's house and they have a TV that they tell you to turn on, right? And you go and you look at the remote and the remote is kind of odd and you can't see, some remotes have the power button like right up on the front and with a big red button, and then there's others that have the power button like on the side or something weird like that, right? So you might be looking at it like, how do I turn this? Right? And your friend's like, oh, the power button's on the side, right? You have to seek out information to get that done, right? If uh if you order a bookshelf in the mail, right? And it comes with all the parts like all separated and you have to assemble it. You're not just going to try to randomly assemble it. You're either going to like try and look it up on YouTube and see if there's somebody showing a guide or instructions on how to assemble it, or you're going to look at the manual that comes with it and go, "Oh, okay. So, part A, this goes to part A2 over here. AB goes to like, so the issue is the lack of knowledge, right? The issue is the lack of knowledge. And a lot of issues that we have as people and problems, even some of the most grievous issues, right? Like say times, let's say something like the civil rights era of America, right? Where a lot of African Americans were pretty tired of the treatment that they were getting and the systemic things that were holding them back, right? There are things that people that were part of the civil rights movements that they had to learn and understand in order to go about doing what they needed to do, right? That was the way for them to go about that without there, being chaos and actually getting some sort of result, right? So, and that should be the same way that everything is looked at, right? Sometimes I think we as people, we just feel things and we're so anxious that we just want to act out because we feel like acting out is better than doing nothing, right? But when you're acting out without knowledge, you're just acting in ignorance. And when you're acting in ignorance, you're 10 times more likely to fail. You're 10 times more likely to avoid and completely miss the mark on what the actual issue is, right? So, what is the cure to anxiety? The cure to anxiety is very simple, it's knowledge. That's why they have that saying, knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you grow, right? The less you know, the more you don't, and the more you won't. All right. The world is filled with a whole lot of anxiety, a whole lot. Because I think at this point, there's things that people want that they have no idea how to get. There's things people are lacking that they have no idea why they're lacking. There's perceptions and emotions that are being thrusted and thrown into people that they have no idea why they're even there to begin with or what's triggering them, right? Because I think if people had knowledge of what actually could help them, of what actually holds them back, of what actually has them in the positions that they're in, right? Some people would probably still be upset and just act out, but other people would maybe stop and recognize, like, okay. Or let me say, if you had knowledge on how to solve your issue, right? You'd probably be less focused on the cause of the issue, right? It's like when you get sick or you get a flu or something like that, you don't sit around like trying to figure out who got you sick and who got the this and who got the no. You want to get better, right? You want to seek out medicine or some kind of aid, something to subside what you're feeling. That's what you're trying to get. That's what you're trying to look out for, right? And the only way to get that is through knowledge, right? So if we look at anxiety like a sickness, right? Sitting around and going over your issues and problems, it's not going to solve your anxiety, right? Because sometimes people think that's the way to solve anxiety. I see that the same way as like somebody with a sore throat sitting around going like, "Oh, I have a sore throat. It specifically hurts me on the left side when I'm swallowing." No, no. The bottom line is you got a sore throat, right? That's the bottom line. You can either choose to go without the medicine and hope you just start feeling better, right, and deal with the pain, or you can get some medication that could subside it, right, and ease it off until you're better. Right? So the same thing with anxiety, right? You need to know what can actually solve it, right? Because for different people it will be different things, right? For some people, the anxiety will come from them not being able to fulfill a dream or a career choice that they've chosen. For some people, it will simply be, them not having their own house or place to live, right? For others, it will be something that's going on in an environment that they go to. And the real issue is that they need to remove themselves from that environment and their anxiety will drop down, right? And for some people, it may be all of those, right? But the first thing that comes first before you're able to even take an action to solving anxiety is the understanding and the knowledge of what's going on in the first place. Because I guarantee you, even if your anxiety is through the roof, even if you have 100% anxiety, off the Richter scales anxiety, category 5 anxiety, however you want to state it, right? The power that knowledge has when you seek it and find it and keep hold of it will cut the anxiety in two.